Hey everyone, and welcome to my audio commentary for To Boldly Flee. Of course, if you're listening to this, you probably know that. Otherwise, how did you get here? Anyway, my name's Noah Antweiler, also known as Spoony, and I play everyone in this movie. No, actually, I have 3 roles, which you'd think would be the most, but actually Doug has edged me out in the number of roles that he plays. I believe that he edges me out because he saw fit to throw in the bum and ask that guy. And he probably plays Mati in the majority of the voiceovers. It's either him or Rob. And he plays the voice of many of the anonymous stormtroopers. I suppose that I should address the pink elephant in the room by talking about my departure from Channel Awesome. Something that has been kept mostly under wraps, mostly because there were some bad situations that stemmed from it. There was problems on Twitter, and people were getting threatened, so I had to kind of keep it quiet, but also try to calm people down. As with anything, it's a very complicated issue, and it's not just one thing. I can tell you one thing. The people kind of settled on the theory that Lupa got me fired somehow for making a joke on Twitter. If you don't know, I made a rather poor taste joke on Twitter that offended Lupa, and I handled it very poorly. Knowing me, I'm the kind of guy who likes to touch raw nerves, and so naturally I started poking sticks at, Lupa, so to speak. I don't know why. I was in a bad headspace at the time, and Lupa took it poorly as well, and so, emotions boiled over, and it got kind of ugly on Twitter. That was not what got me quote-unquote fired, and it didn't really stem, my departure. It wasn't like that. It didn't help, but that wasn't why. So, like I said, there's a lot of factors that built into that, and in no particular order, I guess I could talk about some of them. Some that make me look bad, and some that are just kind of business decisions. I guess the first thing I would talk about is there's kind of a financial aspect to this, and me and Doug and Rob didn't really talk all that much about it, mostly because we kind of knew where it was going, and that is, I loved making these movies. I'm very proud to be in this movie in particular because I really think it's by far the most emotional and the best quality movie we've done. However, as my own site has grown and my own business has grown, my schedule is rather hectic. I work virtually every day. And so while I enjoy making these films and I would love to show this to people, it takes 2 weeks out of my life. This one in particular took like 10 days just to get it shot, and then I have to take a couple days to recover. It really, 2 weeks, that's a lot of money when it comes to, how much I make or how much product I have to put out. So, really my only, basically I had to ask for money in this case, because I was like, aside from having a great movie here, which is major, I don't see a dime from these films. They recoup the travel costs, but still, when it comes down to it, I'm making a net loss. And so, again, that wasn't something there was hard feelings about. It was just like, I could ask them for money and they wouldn't give it to me. So, that's one that makes me look kind of bad because you probably think I'm money grubbing. But, the plain fact was I probably wasn't going to get paid. And so, now that the site has evolved, who's to say whether or not people were going to get paid? They were talking like they wanted to fly me down to be part of the new channel. I just don't know that was going to pan out. Which leads me to the next kind of reason I left, was because Doug was going to kill off the Nostalgia Critic, and we all pretty much knew that, or at least I did. And, the site was going to fundamentally change on a lot of levels, to the point where, basically the title character of the entire website, I know Ask That Guy is basically it, but, Doug was sinking his own, his character. So it was just kind of this thing where things were changing, and I figured I should change with it. I didn't see myself moving to Chicago, packing up my whole life to go there, especially when there wasn't a whole lot of security, like job security. It would basically mean I'd have to sync my own show, which I wasn't ready to do. I'm making decent money off the show. And it was just kind of those things where there weren't really guarantees, and I'd have to throw my whole life into upheaval to go there. And, who's to say? The future is promising for Doug and Rob, but it's a big risk, and it's not one that I'm prepared to make, at least not right now. Just knowing that Doug was hanging up the Nostalgia Critic, it really made me think on a lot of levels about, what I wanted to do with this and where I wanted to go with my own character and my own career, if you can call this a career. But, and in many ways that's the point of this movie, is that times are changing. And I'll get to this in a little while, but the handwriting's on the wall for critics in a lot of ways. And this is all about, like, where we go from here. Things are, the website is changing. The world is changing. The legal issues surrounding what we do are changing. And so that's a major theme of this film is, what are we going to do when the bottom falls out of this? Because nothing lasts forever. And so I really had to think about that. Shooting this movie really made me think about that. And in many ways, I just thought it would be better to pursue my own interests here. And again, this makes me sound bad, but in many ways, I just didn't need Channel Awesome anymore. I just didn't. In the sense that it was a really one-sided relationship. Again, don't get me wrong, I loved working for these guys, and these movies that I've done with them are some of the best work I've ever done, and I'm very proud to have done it. But from a business standpoint, I wasn't getting much out of it, and by that I mean, monetarily, I don't see anything from the movies aside from the commentaries, which they're very kind actually to let me have on my own channel. Also, the whole reason that I kind of joined was they were looking for producers, basically on YouTube, to kind of drive up their traffic, and it was kind of a mutual agreement where I wasn't getting paid from them, but that wasn't the point. It was more a sort of traffic exchange where my fans would visit that guy with the glasses, and that guy, people, if they saw my videos, would go to my site. Unfortunately, I don't think it worked out that way for either side. I really don't think I was sending them all that much traffic. My fans on my site tend to stay there. Aside from the crossovers, they don't tend to hover. And I get that, because there's a lot of critics out there, and not many hours in the day. I can't keep up with all the other critics. I think I've mentioned this before, but I think sometimes it puts off other critics when I tell them I haven't seen their work, because they're like, well, we work together, you should watch my shit. And I'm like, I work so much on my own reviews that, and there's so many of you, if I was watching all your videos, that's all I'd be doing all day. So I think usually a lot of fans tend to pick out, one or two of their favorites and just kind of stick that way. So I think that was it, and I know for a fact I wasn't getting any traffic from them, because I checked my statistics, and the referral traffic from them was probably less than 1% of what I would get. And most of those were probably kind of accidental clicks. Also, from a purely selfish standpoint, they never put... I think they did put my link beneath the videos. But also, on another respect, their website is so poorly designed. It really is atrocious. My videos are so buried beneath a nest of, layered, rooted menus that if you wanted to find my stuff, I think I'm under, like, blistered thumbs, side critics, and, like, I'm so far buried you can't see what I'm doing. And I'm one of the more popular guys on that site, or I was. Going from there, I really disagreed with the business direction that they were going with in terms of talent acquisition. It's not that I didn't like anybody who was involved with the site. I like virtually everybody. They do good stuff. But they went on a huge talent recruiting drive. They were importing critics from around the internet like crazy. And it was too much. It's too much for one site to contain all these people, or at least the way the site is organized. There's no way you can follow all these people, and just there's such a divide between the critics, popularity and popularity and the range of topics they cover. It's actually downright confusing. They bring a new guy in and you're like, who's this guy? And you're not really willing to invest the time to learn a new guy when you've kind of got your favorites already. And that's not to say they don't do good work. They do. But there were so many people, it was confusing me. People were showing up to these videos, these movie shoots, and I'm like, I don't even know who you are. And again, it's not because I don't like them, it's just because there's so many people, and I'm working so hard on my stuff that it's just impossible for me to keep up. But that sudden influx of critics and talent made it so that there was a lot of jealousy and politics and cattiness that started going on, not only with the site but with the movie shoots on their own. And I can actually touch on both of them. But in terms of scheduling on the site, I think they had 6 to 7 videos scheduled for the kind of the headline videos per day. But there's so many critics that even I could not schedule a video for like 3 weeks at a time. You had to schedule so far in advance that it was ridiculous. Then basically management of the company would decide who gets the kind of the prime choices when it comes to who appears first on the ticker or whatever the headline thing is. So Doug always got top billing when Doug did videos. I think I usually got kind of top to second billing whenever I did mine. Characters like Snob, Linkara, the major ones would get kind of the prime choices, and even I didn't really think that was fair, but I know for a fact that a lot of producers didn't believe that was fair. So they would actually try to trade spaces or schedule on a time when I or Doug or whoever was going to get the top space or whoever they suspected wouldn't be having a video. And so there was also some kind of jealousy in the sense, like, just for example, let's say, Bennett landed the top spot, and other people would be like, well, why don't I get the top spot? Are you saying I'm not as good as Bennett, or I'm not as popular? And to a degree, yes, that's what they were saying. And to be fair, that's what I would be saying as well. It's just, like, I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. These guys draw more traffic, so they're going to get the top spot. And there's a kind of catch-22. Is like, well, how do you expect me to get popular when you bury me 5 or 6 layers down on the headline? I don't know. But that goes right back to the problem is there's too many critics on the site, and the site is so poorly designed that it's virtually impossible for anyone to get exposure. And it was just the kind of thing I really didn't want to get involved with. People, I think there was a lot of people who didn't like me personally because I was, without intending to, it's not like I was campaigning for the top spot, it was just the way it worked. And so I think there was some bitterness involved there. But, and also, again, I think this movie turned out fantastic, and in fact, I'm really, really impressed. I don't know how Doug did it. I've never understood how he did it, even with Kick-Assia, to write so many fucking characters into a movie and still give them all screen time, give them all their moments. And you can agree or disagree with that. For instance, Bennett has almost always been shafted in terms of screen time. In Suburban Nights, he basically has like one major scene. And he was written into that movie quite a bit, where he would kind of do this Aslan bit where he would kind of reverse turns of phrases, kind of like Yoda. And they cut virtually all of that. So Bennett is almost not in that movie. And that they built this whole gag around him. So when they cut part of the gag, they had to cut all the gag. But for the most part, he wrote in a ridiculous number of characters and did it relatively successfully. And this one, more than any of them, I finished Suburban Nights, and I actually went directly to them, and I was like, we can't do this again. There were so many characters, so many actors. We nearly didn't get this shot. In fact, if we shot Suburban Nights almost like Ed Wood. As soon as we got any kind of coherent take, we just cut and moved on, So we're very fortunate Suburban Nights turned out as well as it did, and I was like, look, unless we're going to spend twice as much time, twice to 3 times as much time shooting these videos, we cannot have this many characters at all. And so they're like, well, actually, we're thinking of like inviting 6 more people to the next one. And I was like, you got to be fucking kidding me. That's You can't. He did it, but I would never wish that on any screenwriter. It I still think it was a mistake, and I'm saying that even knowing this movie was as good as it was. There's too many characters here. They all get really good moments, but I think the movie might have been better if we'd cut it down. And again, I'm backpedaling quite a lot. Everyone did great in this movie. And part of the point of this movie is we have all of these characters who never get together, and they're all kind of uniting to make this really great product. It's still too many. And again, the anniversaries were a real sense of real sore spot, a source of tension among the producers. And there's oh God, even I cracked me up. But there was a lot of bitterness involved with the anniversaries as well. I would hear about this every year. People would talk to me on Skype, like I think they thought I had some kind of I had Doug's ear or something like that in terms of business decisions, and I didn't. But they were like, how come this producer got invited to Suburban Nights and I didn't? Or how come, the people who lived overseas were like, one person who lived in England or France would be like, how come, for instance, in Suburban, how come Bensai gets to go and I don't? Or how come Dude in the Suede gets to come here and I don't? Because Suede hasn't been on the site for a year. And that's not to say it's Suede's fault or Bensai's fault. It's just, and I understand. I'd be hurt too. Like if I lived overseas and they only flew like one or two producers in and I didn't get invited, I'd be like, well, that sucks. Or if I was even one of the local guys and they're like they invite everyone else but not me, I would be upset, and understandably so. And I don't know how you fix that, except for you just got to make some hard decisions when it comes to who you invite. In fact, I was telling them, these movies should not involve more than 10. And I was like, we invited I think like 16 to 17 producers. I was like, they said we're going to invite like 5 to 6 more, and I'm like, I was going to suggest you cut about 6. And I just don't know who you'd pick, except from a purely selfish business standpoint, you've got to invite the guys who draw the most traffic. And I think people would understand that. They wouldn't like it, but they would understand it. The alternative was that they were thinking of filming kind of a side project, like a B movie, where the other producers would get together and shoot something. And honestly, that was a pretty good idea. Channel Awesome didn't like it because they didn't want to have everyone do all this work on the off chance that the end product would really suck. Like if they spent all this time and they put it together and the movie turned out really sucking, they didn't want to throw production money into something that the Walkers themselves did not write, because then there was no, I won't say guarantee, but there wasn't a lot of guarantee that they would get a good product out of it. And I kind of disagreed. Everyone seemed really anxious and eager to do this side project, and I think maybe they should have just let him do it. But that ties into the same kind of business decision that I think caused a lot of cattiness and politics among the producers. And even I was getting dragged into it, and I didn't want that to happen. But the only reason there was so much bitterness and hurt feelings over who got invited was because there's too many producers. And to a major extent, I think it really dilutes the product. It more hurts people than it helps when you bring that many producers. I know they want to give people more exposure. I know they want to draw more traffic. But when you have so many producers, I think it probably frustrates the viewers. The site is so poorly designed, you can't find who you want to find. There's so many people there, you just get confused and you don't want to go digging through all these people. It's better if you only have a few select people to be the flagship of the site. I mean, I know what they were doing. They were trying to give more producers exposure and in turn give the site more exposure. But with so many producers, I think it's kind of a rate of diminishing returns. When you've got a few dozen producers on there, nobody gets exposure because people get buried on the site, nobody gets seen. There were some hurt feelings when I left, and ironically, it wasn't with Lupa. I pissed her off, she pissed me off. it got to the point where, eventually people stopped getting mad and we're cool. We're not hugging or anything like that. It's kind of that kind of cool where, you said shit, I said shit, let's just forget about it, and we're cool, but we probably shouldn't be in the same room, so, we're fine as far as that goes. Yeah, it wasn't Lupa. It was just there were some people who really didn't like me, and I didn't like them. I won't name names, but there were some producers, and there were some people in management that I just didn't see a future in that. And the reason there were hurt feelings was because of the Nutso situation on Twitter, where I really did start acting like a bastard and started like really slacking people online. You can't go doing that and not expect repercussions, and so. That kind of spurred the discussion on where I wanted to go and how much I was willing to. Basically, they talked to me and they said, you can't go, you can't be this way online. And I go, why? And I go, why? I can say what I want. And so that was my being a bitch. But they were like, you represent the company now. And we can't have somebody representing the company if they're going to act like this. And I go, fair enough. I said, fair enough. I want to be me. I want to say what I want to say, even if that shit is offensive. And so, even the situation with Lupa, it was the kind of thing where I wasn't really sorry for what I said. I was sorry the situation turned so ugly, but it wasn't even the kind of joke that everyone thought it was the kind of joke. But even so, if it was inappropriate, so what? It's not there was a fair amount of hypocrisy involved because people make those jokes, and I wasn't the first guy to do that. And she uses the joke, so it was the kind of thing where I kind of felt it wasn't a good joke. My joke sucked, but I was like, what do you mean I can't say that kind of thing? And so, but they had a point. I get it. If I was running a company, I wouldn't want somebody being a complete asshole online because it reflects badly on the company. On the other hand, if you know Spoony, you know how I act, and that's just Spoony. It's very clear when you're following my Twitter. That's not the views of Channel Awesome. I think that's clear, and I think they really made a mountain out of a molehill on that. So I don't know. So if there was an argument, it basically boiled down to, Spoony, you can't make shitty, stupid jokes like this. And I go, why not? And so they go, well, because you're representing the company and you're suspended. And I'm not the kind of guy who deals with being told what to do very well. I was like, oh, suspending me, okay, that's great. And I was like, it's not like you're really hurting me here. I can't post videos here for 3 weeks. And it just got me. That's kind of what spurred my thinking. It didn't get me fired. It was kind of like, they're suspending me, and I really don't care. I was like, so what? I'm not getting anything out of this relationship. For them, it reached a point where they liked me and they liked my work, but I had a lot of baggage and bullshit. They were just kind of sick of my bullshit, and rightly so. I had issues. Shortly after my departure, I kind of went to pieces, not because of the departure, but mentally I just had a virtually complete breakdown. And I went to see a new psychiatrist, actually, because the one I was seeing wasn't doing shit. And I got diagnosed with bipolar 2. They switched my meds. And it was like night and day. You may not know this, but, medicines are very different, especially when they're treating different things. So the medicines that treat depression are vastly different from the ones that treat bipolar 2. And the depression meds were doing nothing. But when I switched to the bipolar meds, it was like night and day. It made my mood, it stabilized it to where I wasn't sleeping too much. There was just such a feeling of constant dread and unmotivation that was going on. It was hurting my work, and it was hurting everyone else. And it kind of spurred the manic episodes on Twitter. And here's where I'm going with this. I'm not making excuses. I'm not. I'm telling you the reason for it, but that doesn't excuse it in any way. I was being an asshole. I'm still an asshole in many ways, but at least my head is clear because of it. But it wasn't the bipolar that made the bad joke. It wasn't the bipolar that was necessarily poking Lupa or pissing people off on Twitter, or even it didn't really inspire my decision to leave. It didn't inspire the hurt feelings. It didn't help, But ultimately, the decision to sit at the keyboard, type the shit I typed, no matter what kind of chemical imbalance I might have had, I could have walked away and I didn't, you know. So I'm not passing off any blame or guilt on that. It was just this, really, it was, of anything, it was just hurting my work and my own relationships. It didn't really have anything to do with the company. So I'm much better now. The meds are working great. But even I think from a business perspective, even if I wanted to come back, I really don't think they'd take me because, again, it was just kind of one of those things where, you know, Spoony's a good guy and all that, but he's kind of crazy. You know, like he's that kind of guy where you can't really control him, and he could kind of snap at any time. You know, and you know, at that time it was likely. You know, I was that kind of guy where I wouldn't want to manage me to a degree, you know, just because you never know when this guy's going to disappear on you or go ape shit on Twitter and just do something monumentally stupid. I get it. So again, this is what I'm talking about in terms of a mutual departure / you know, you're leaving, okay, you're fired, you know. But when I say fired, they understood. You know, they understood the business side of it, and they kind of agreed, you know, not on everything, but they understood why I would think the things I thought. They understood that even at the time I wasn't well. They were very nice on checking up on me. You know, they were trying to make sure I was okay, and I wasn't, but they cared, you know, they still care. And so they understand. And that's why I say there's really no hard feelings among the majority of the producers and management. But just because I'm not posting videos on the site anymore doesn't mean I'm completely isolated and cut off from the other producers. I'm not. In fact, most of my relationships with them are continuing, you know. I still work with Brad Jones. I will still work with Linkara, and I'm not forbidden from working with them if I want to. It's kind of one of those things where, though, I probably shouldn't, especially if it's going to be involved in any kind of official production. But, you know, I built relationships with them mostly outside of Channel Awesome. And that's it. And so, you know, the work I'm doing with these guys is great. In fact, the work I've been doing outside of the site has really inspired me to look into other things aside from reviewing. I'm looking into doing more acting. You know, I was in the Cinema Snob movie, and I had so much fun there, and I did so much better, you know, than I thought. Everyone was saying, you know, what a great job I did, and it made me feel really good. You know, it made me feel really good, like maybe there's a future in this. Could have been blowing smoke up my ass, but it helped me out, you know. That helped pull me out of the holes to be like, you know, you're really, really talented. You know, people telling me that I did really well in To Boldly Flee, they were like, you can act, man. And I was like, I honestly never thought I could. I'd been in some productions, but I always thought I was pretty bad. So, you know, the Spoony Experiment videos, I wasn't really acting so much, or at least not at first. I wasn't really acting. But, you know, I was just kind of being me. Although I've heard that, you know, acting sometimes is very hard because I've seen actors not be able to do that. You know, they're like, just be yourself. And they're like, I don't know how to do that. But again, it ties into the theme of the movie to an extent is, what do we do? It's kind of those, what do we do when we finally grow up? You know, we got to have some idea. Do we quit? Do we go on? Is there a time when we can't do this anymore? And what do guys like us do when what we do can no longer be done? I guess I'll wrap this up with just kind of one more mention of how the kind of, I hate to say politics, because that wasn't really it, but I think this shoot more than ever, it was kind of apparent how there was a little bit of uncomfortable relationships here. Again, okay. I've always said it's bad to shit where you eat. I always think it's a bad idea to establish romantic relationships with people on the set. I call it set incest. And it just gets awkward, especially if it goes bad. And nothing went bad on the set. I'm just saying it kind of is disturbing to me on a level where it's almost like sometimes in D&D when the DM brings his girlfriend, or, you know, the DM brings her boyfriend, or whatever. Whoever you bring your significant other to the table, there becomes problems, in terms of fairness, who gets treated more fairly, and also if feelings get hurt, all of a sudden you've pissed two people off. So, if it happens that, people rub each other the wrong way, and all of a sudden you've made lots of people uncomfortable. And again, that's why you don't do that. That's why, and there's matters of professionalism, I think, and I know me, right, bringing up matters of professionalism, but when it comes to acting and work, I actually do try to take things seriously, especially in a film set. I really like to consider myself a guy who wants to stay on task, who doesn't like to goof around. When there's a call at 8 o'clock, I show up at 8 o'clock ready to work. Now, there were issues on the set in terms of my own self that kind of limited my ability to work at full tilt that might have slowed the production down, but I'll get to that. Mainly, it was just kind of physical limitations of my own that might have frustrated some people, but yeah, again, I'll get to that. But yeah, in terms of personal relationships, I always try to keep things friendly, but I'm not really going to go screwing things up with other people in terms of, romantic relationships, and I just really disagree with the way people were going on that. This is one of the best bits in the movie, I think, and people actually were really complimenting me on my acting here, and I don't know, I was just like, I think this kind of harkens back to a Simpsons gag. And no, I don't have a saxophone-shaped penis. I'll show you if you want. And I don't have a long-lost sister. My sister has been entirely found. Okay, I'm going to get into a whole awkward area here. Anyway, now that I've made you all thoroughly uncomfortable by bitching for a half hour on all my problems with other people and my problems with the company, I think it's time we finally moved on. I hope that I have explained whatever issues that I've had with the site, management, and producers. Again, if I've made people, if I've hurt feelings, or if any of the producers are listening to this and think that I'm referring to you and thinking that I don't like you, anything I'm mentioning is just kind of a general impression. Honestly, at the end of the day, I don't care. If you want to, seriously, I'm not going to tell you how to live your have relationships. That's not my business. After all, you can see how my own relationships have gone. I am hardly an authority on how to live one's romantic life. So, at least take my complaints for where they're coming from. Again, I am probably the worst guy to take criticism from when it comes to personal lives and business management and what you can and shouldn't say online. I am horrible at these things, but that's me. That's, for better or worse, that's me. And I think everyone tries to be a better person. I think I am a better person now just because I'm finally kind of stabilized on meds. But I can't help feeling the way I feel. I honestly harbor no ill will, even if I am referring to the people I'm referring to. I guess you know what I mean. I hope everyone's happy. I hope everyone who sticks with the company is perfectly happy with the company. And honestly, I'm really interested to see where Channel Awesome goes, because the new shows sound exciting, and he's going into a really uncharted territory by ending his most successful character. That is almost unheard of, but I think he's really he's going out on top. Instead of riding the gimmick into the ground, which I think actually he would say he's done, he wants to move on. He doesn't want to be known for that character for all time. He thinks, and he does have better stuff in him. So I'm excited to see that. I just don't know that my being with the company is, I'm the, I might be the producer they deserve, but not the one they need right now. I don't know. I think they'll be fine without me, and I think I'll be fine without them. And that's not to say I'll never work with these guys again. In fact, Rob and Doug have made it very clear that they're just a phone call away. Rob has actually flown in to do the cinematography for one of my videos. This was before I left, but he said, there's no hard feelings here. If you want to do something, we can do it outside of the company, and it's cool. So that's where we're at. This is actually moving on to the movie. We're finally at the movie in my discussion. I'll start with the scene that you that Last Angry Geek shows of the surveillance footage of Mati doing the giving the Katra, Spock's Katra, to me. That was actually shot at the end of Suburban Nights. They didn't know what form this movie would take, but Rob said, we're thinking of basically, Mati dies, and the next movie we're thinking of doing like a Search for Spock thing where, we're looking for him, there's a way to bring him back. And so I don't know if it was my idea or Rob's idea, but I was like, he should, if he's going to give someone the Katra, it should probably be someone who is probably going to be in the next one, And so I think maybe it was originally intended to be Doug, but he's like, I think Doug wants to, he doesn't want to be that guy because he's going to be doing other things. He wants to, I'll get to this in the next part, but he's like, well, we'll shoot a thing. We'll shoot this thing where Mati does the Katra to me. So we went out to the field where we did the thing, and it's supposed to be just after the final battle with Malachite. And we just shot that very short scene where Mati goes, remember. And it turned out it worked out, that is, there's a few movies this To Boldly Flee is centrally based on. It references virtually every sci-fi movie ever made. But the primary structure of this movie is kind of an amalgam of Search for Spock, The Undiscovered Country, Star Trek The Undiscovered Country, and Return of the Jedi. If you're going to pick out three major films. Ironically, one movie that has almost nothing to do is Battlefield Earth, especially considering, or Superman, Superman 2, especially considering the villains are Turl and General Zod. No, we don't touch those. No, I think we referenced Krypton like once, and Battlefield Earth virtually never. Although, one of the clever things that I suggested for this movie, and they actually rolled with it, was that every time Turl is on screen and alone, usually in a close-up, we shoot it in Dutch angle. If you watch Battlefield Earth, virtually every shot, I think there's only like 1 or 2 shots in Battlefield Earth that isn't filmed at a Dutch angle. If you don't know what Dutch angle is, you turn the camera sideways slightly so that the shot is slightly not horizontal, it's at an angle. And the reason people do that is because it's an unnatural viewpoint. It puts the viewer ill at ease. It's not the way you normally see things. So every shot in Battlefield Earth is like that. So whenever you see Turl in close-up, it's always off kilter. One thing that made the shooting of this kind of awkward, and I don't know if they knew this before the end of Suburban Nights, was Bargo's departure. Bargo's the guy who plays Mati. And he's credited as Mati in this movie, even though the only time he ever appears is in the flashback sequences. And he left the company, I think, shortly after the production of Suburban Nights. And so they were like, how's your Mati impression? And I was like, it's okay, I guess. And so they're like, work on it. So I worked on it for about a week. And I think the only time you hear me do the Mati impression is at the very beginning where I play Dr. McCoy. And he's like, are you out of your Spoony mind or something like that? And people said I did okay. I think the only other time is when I'm in the bed with Film Brain. No, Film Brain's talking to me, and I go, nothing! They said I did fine. I don't know. You be the judge. What I always find hilarious about the Mati voice is it's nothing like the actual Mati voice from Captain Planet. I've been told that when Mati first appeared on the site, Bargo just went with that voice. He's just he was like, critic, I know things are tough, but you need to believe in heart. Nothing to do with the actual Mati. I always thought, I can't remember what Mati sounded like. I might be thinking of like whatever the African dude is, but yeah, he doesn't sound like Mati. I had to spasm in this chair for about half hour. It's not as easy as it looks. I don't know if this is referencing a sci-fi movie in particular. the shit flashing across the screen, the only thing I can think of, you'll probably correct me on this, and I hope you do, it reminds me of War Games, the end of War Games, when the computer is kind of running through every possible permutation of the tic-tac-toe game. I don't know where this comes from. I'd be interested to know. Yeah, I spazzed him in that chair for about a half hour. Ironically enough, usually when I do stuff like that, like if I headbang or stuff like that, or I try to, it kind of rattles my brain around in my little brain around in my huge head. I get a migraine usually when I do that. I also was doing this one thing where I was trying to do the thing where I'm kind of comatose, and I started drooling in one of the takes. I was hoping they'd use that, but it probably looked nasty. Anyway, back for part 2.